Welcome to Human Monsters. And part 2 of The Horrors of Human Trafficking, Timea Nagy's story, as adapted from her memoir, Out of the Shadows. Timea took out her journal at the motel and wrote under her alias, Andrea Hernus. She wrote down the names and phone numbers of her next of kin so that if something happened to her, there would be a way to get the news to her loved ones in Hungary. Considering the circumstances in which she found herself, it was a completely rational thing to do. She proceeded from there to write a note to Alec, to be read only in the event that she run away to escape her life in sex work. In the letter she wrote, "Dear Alec, I lost it completely. I spoke with my family and I have to go home ASAP. I am not trying to take off, cut you short, or steal from you. I will come back." She hoped it would get through to him. Fuck. Timea became friendly with a Canadian-born security guard at Fantasia named Julius, who spoke Hungarian because of being raised by Hungarian parents. She told him about her situation, and it piqued his curiosity. He found the details of Alec's operation troubling. He referred her to a woman who toiled at the club as a sex worker. She was also Canadian-born and spoke fluent Hungarian. It wasn't long before Maria could tell Timea was taken in by swindlers and gangsters. Timea recalled how that conversation went. "Hi," I said to her casually in Hungarian. "That guy over there said I should come and talk to you." "Sure," she said. "What's up?" She spoke Hungarian the same way that Julius did, so I knew she'd been raised in Canada, too. I didn't know how to start our conversation or where I even wanted to go with it. Luckily, she spoke first. "I've noticed you've been here for a while now, and you're great on the dance floor. Why don't you ever go upstairs?" "I don't even know what upstairs means exactly," I said, sidetracked. "They're rooms for sex," she said, simply. "You can make $300, $400, $500 per client up there." "Oh, I don't do that," I said, shaking my head. "I'm just a dancer." "So then why are you here?" "Most girls want to make money the fastest way possible." "Who brought you here?" "The Hungarian guys, Alec Pesky and Jay something. I don't know his last name." "Who are they?" she asked. "They're my agents." "Your agents?" she asked, eyebrows raised. I nodded. The knot in my gut was getting tighter as I watched Maria's reaction to my answers. She exhaled slowly as though she was putting a puzzle together in her head. "How much of your money do you give them?" "Well, it's a little complicated because of all the expenses," I began, "and what I owe them for getting me here from Budapest." Maria listened intently. The look of concern on her face drew my worry. "Why do you know them?" "I don't know them," she said, "but I know they're kind." What was that supposed to mean? "What about you?" I asked, suddenly feeling as though I needed to stop talking about myself and my situation. I had already said way too much, and I didn't know Maria or Julius or where this was going. "Who do you work for?" "I work for myself," she said. "I come here for a few hours, I make a few $100s, and then I leave." "What do you mean you leave?" I asked. "I finish my shift, and then I go home. I have another part-time job and a son." "How do you get here?" I asked, piecing together what she was telling me and trying to picture her life. "I drive myself. I have a car." "You drive?" I asked, surprised. I didn't know of girls who drove themselves to clubs. Of course, why wouldn't I? She said. Well, because of all the police, spies, and rapists, I explained. What are you talking about? She was bewildered. Well, I began, I guess if you were born here, you might not know this, but Toronto is full of spies and undercover cops looking for people who are here illegally. And if you're caught, you go to jail. And all the taxi drivers are rapists. Are you here illegally? She asked. No, I have an exotic dancer work permit, I said, leaving out the part about my passport being a fake. I had to change the subject quick before I said any more. I actually just wanted to know if you know other girls in my group. My agents told me they have someone here on the inside. Maria looked at me directly now, very concerned. There is no one here watching you, Allison. Why are they saying there is? I didn't know how to answer. Seeing the expression on my face, she said, Listen, we should talk more, but not now. I need to get back to work. Find me tomorrow. I nodded, but wasn't sure if I actually would talk to her again. Was she a friend or someone else who was going to take advantage of me? The next morning, on the way to the club, Alec told Victoria, Adina, and me that we needed to call him 3 times per day to report on our earnings. He had bought a cellular phone so that he was always within reach, and he gave us the number and some quarters for the payphone inside the club. My guy on the inside is going to be calling me too, he said, to make sure you're telling me the truth. I decided I should try to keep an eye on who made phone calls to see if I could pinpoint our watchman, although it would be almost impossible since I was on stage or in the VIP room for all but a few minutes per day. That was just before we got to Fantasia. We stopped at a gas station with a payphone so Alec could show us how to use it. I made my first call to him from the club a few hours later and reported my earnings of $330. Oh, I know, Alex said. I got a call from my guy. Good girl, Tamika. It was creepy being watched, but all I could do was follow every rule and somehow try to figure out who Alex's guy was. Sometime in the afternoon, I saw Maria near the stage, and when she spotted me, she beckoned me over. I glanced around as I walked toward her to see if anyone was tracking me in the crowded club. I didn't see anyone who seemed focused on me. How's it going? She asked. Good, fine, I said. But can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you think Julius is my agent's guy on the inside? What do you mean? She asked. I mean, is he the one watching me and the other girls in my group and reporting back to our agents? Julius? No. He's not involved in anything like that. He's a straight-up security guard. Then do you have any idea who it might be? Honestly, Allison, like I said before, no one is watching you. I think there's something fucked up with your whole situation, she said. She didn't know my whole situation. She had no idea how the agency had helped me get here, what I faced back in Hungary with my debts, and how I had no other way to make the kind of money that I needed. Alec and Janos wanted to help me. Yes, there was the other stuff. The Sunday night drug parties, the visitors they sent, the stories of what they did to other girls and what they'd done to Rika and Hannah. But they were protecting me. I worked for them. I had signed a contract. But what if Maria was right? What if there was something messed up going on? I couldn't really imagine what it was, nor was I ready to find out. So I left Maria standing there and went back to dancing. I called Alec a few hours later to report another $410 earned, and then one last time around 2 a.m. about another $590. I'd spent $10 on fries and a soft drink at the bar, but I didn't mention it, and neither did he. It made me wonder if his guy had seen me and it was allowed, or if he hadn't seen me at all. How many girls was he watching anyway? Just one group of three, or were there more? Even keeping track of the three of us in the huge club would be hard, especially with all the VIP rooms and, of course, upstairs. I had to figure out who the guy was. Another day, Maria brought Timea in back of the club for another talk. Maria said, "Those guys, the ones that drop you off, are pimps." Timea was very upset by this revelation. She said, "They're not pimps. I'm not pimped." She ran through her thoughts on that matter. Pimps managed prostitutes. I knew this from the movies, and my mom had cases in the red light district. Alec and Janos were agents managing exotic dancers on a work program approved by the Canadian government. I knew that exotic dancer meant stripper, and that there were a lot of opportunities to do much more than just strip. But Alec and Janos didn't force any of us to have sex with customers. It was our choice. But then there were all those motel visitors, our protectors and others who came for sex. And there was Tony. I didn't want to go there. "Yes, they are, and yes, you are," she said, exhaling a big puff of smoke. "No way," I said. "No way." "Okay," she said. "How much money do you have?" "Well, I give all to them, and then they write it down, and they take off all the expenses, so I have money, I just don't have it." As I explained aloud, the story started to sound a little weak. "How long have you been here? How much have you made?" Maria asked. "I came April 27th, but had to go back to Hungary for a while. I returned on May 18th, so I've been here about 2 months, and I've made a lot." "How much?" Maria interrupted. "I have the $150 I made so far today, but the rest is in my agency account." "What's the balance in your account?" "I'm not too sure," I stammered, thinking back to the last few nights of family meetings. They'd been rushed, and I hadn't paid attention. Now that our work days were longer than ever, all I could think about at 7:30 a.m. was sleeping until 9:30 a.m. Not too much because I'm still paying off my debt, and there are a lot of expenses, like the oil changes. I let my words trail off, feeling foggy. All these weeks I'd been thinking of nothing but numbers, but now I realized that I'd somehow lost track. I felt like an idiot. "Oil changes for his car?" Maria asked. "It's our car." "Have you seen the ownership card in your name?" She looked at me straight in the eyes, and I knew I couldn't lie. "So how much do you pay for oil changes?" "Usually around $360. "What?" Maria's eyebrows shot up and her mouth fell open. "It's a big SUV, and they drive around all day," I explained what I'd been told. "Where else have you gone? Have you seen much of the city in your time here?" "Nowhere, actually. I'm just here to work, and I can be a tourist later when all my debts are paid off and I have a different job. I wanted to be a babysitter, but when I got here, well, it just worked out differently." "And you said you're not allowed to leave the club?" "No, I can't leave the motel either. It's too dangerous." The way Maria was asking questions reminded me of being interrogated at the airport, like I was stupid and everything I was saying was being picked apart. I wanted to be taken seriously, to be believed. Maria considered my words and then asked another question. Were you always this skinny? I've been watching you, and you only eat once a day, and hardly anything. Why is that? You must be starving." She put her hand on my waist then, and gave it a gentle pinch, feeling my bones. "I am, but the food is too expensive to eat more than once a day. That's the agency rule, 1 meal per day." As I repeated the words Alec had drilled into me and all the other girls, in my own voice I realized it was ridiculous and cruel, inhumane. Maria looked appalled. I suddenly felt very lightheaded and reached for the handrail behind me. "Look at me, Allison," Maria said. I followed her order and looked into her eyes. They were deep brown, and in that moment filled with sympathy. They were the eyes of someone who cared about my well-being, not only my debt. "When you're ready to leave them, you let me know, and I'll help you leave the agency." I thought about Rika and Hannah. I thought about the girl burned by hot oil. I thought about the police. I thought about jail. I thought about my mom and my brother back in Hungary. I can't leave. No one can leave. And why not? "Because I have a fake passport," I confessed. Then I felt defensive. "I got myself into debt, so I signed up with the agency. I wanted to come here, and they tried to help me. That's how it is. I owe them, and I can't leave until I'm paid up." She looked at me, listening and waiting, as if she knew there was more. I thought about the newest rule that had been laid out for us by Alec. During a recent family meeting, when some new girls had arrived, if any girl ran away, she would be charged $500 for each day that she was gone. And she will be found. That much was certain. She would be found, and if she wasn't found quickly enough, her family would be found. I told Maria about the rule. "So they're threatening you?" she asked. "I wouldn't call it threatening," I said. "They're trying to run a business, and they have a lot of clubs and a lot of girls. Plus, they have a big boss they have to report to, and he is really strict. He's Ukrainian, and you know how Ukrainian guys are." I sounded just like Alec. "Okay," Maria said, slowly and clearly. "I'm going to give you my number, and you can call me when you're ready to get out of this, or just talk to me here." "Don't write anything down," I said. "I can't have anything on me, or they will find it. We're not supposed to talk to anyone else. I'm already putting myself in jeopardy right now." I put my shoes back on, crushed out my cigarette, and reached for the door handle. She put her hand over mine. "When you're ready to leave, I'll help you," she repeated firmly. "I can't leave." Why couldn't she understand? I pulled my hand back from under hers and let go of the door handle. "If I leave, they will call the police. The police will find me and put me in jail because of my passport. Or they'll find me themselves, and it would be worse than jail. Don't you get it?" Maria listened intently, but didn't say a word. "And Sasha will find my brother in Budapest. They already told me they can't protect him from Sasha." It almost felt good to get it out, to tell someone. But as I said the words, I realized more deeply than ever just how trapped I really was. There was no way out. I dropped my hands to my sides. It was hopeless. "Who's Sasha?" Maria asked. "The big boss, the Ukrainian." She shook her head. "There's no big boss, Allison. There's no Sasha." "Yes, there is," I said. "I've heard them talking on the phone." She let this argument go. "So, who is watching you here?" she asked. "I don't know. I can't figure it out." "You're here almost 20 hours every day. Have you ever seen anyone who was here as much as you and the other girls in your group?" "Well, no, but I'm always busy dancing, so I can't pay attention." "Allison, there is no one here watching you. No manager would let someone hang around here 20 hours a day for free, or just to have a few drinks and some food. And this club doesn't work with pimps. They're the lowest of the low. Sure, a lot of the girls have them, but they're not allowed inside. That was when it hit me. Maybe Alec and Janos really were pimps. Did Natasha back in Hungary know that she was recruiting for pimps? That her boyfriend was a pimp? Did the drivers know that they weren't working for an agency? All of this information made my head spin. No, Maria was wrong. Maybe Alec and Janos weren't the nicest guys, but they weren't pimps. They have no idea what you're doing in here all day, Maria assured me. They have no idea how much you make, how you make it, what you wear, what you eat, how many pieces of gum you chew, what the fees are, nothing. They know nothing. I stared at her in disbelief. You could walk out of here right now, and they wouldn't know until they come to pick you up, and you're not here. But they will find and kill my brother. She said, It's all bullshit. Feeling dizzy, I sat down on the metal step and put my head between my knees. I had no idea what to think, who to believe, or who to trust. Wait here, Maria said. I'll be right back. She slipped inside the door and left me sitting out on the step, the door still wedged open with her shoe. I looked around at the parking lot and the other warehouses. There wasn't much going on, just a few people getting in and out of cars. I couldn't read any of the signs. I could see a highway off in the distance and cars on it. I looked up above the door for a security camera. There wasn't one. I scanned the tops of the other buildings for guards or cameras, but everything looked normal and quiet. I began to panic. What if a taxi drove by and the driver saw me and came for me? Or a police car? Maria was crazy if she thought I could simply walk away from the agency. In all the time I had been in Canada, I'd never been anywhere but the motel, the massage parlor, and the clubs. I knew no one in this city. I wished I'd kept the phone number the lady on the plane had given me, even though I knew I would be too embarrassed to call someone so much like my mother. I had nowhere to go and no way of surviving on my own. I had to stick to the plan. I only had a few weeks left on my visa, and then I could leave Canada and go back home. I would pay my debt and make sure I had something left to bring back to Budapest with me to Zoli. Then, once I cleaned up that mess, I could start over and get a real job. Maybe I could move somewhere else and put all things in the past. This is Petra, Maria announced, suddenly interrupting my thoughts as she came back outside with a woman. She's also from Hungary. Tell her who you're working for. Petra was different from Maria, edgier, with tattoos and piercings. But she smiled at me. I'd seen her in the club once or twice, but had never spoken to her because she intimidated me and because I wasn't allowed. I was surprised that she was Hungarian. Alok and Janos? I said, hesitating slightly. I didn't know her and didn't know if I could trust her. Those fucking guys are losers, she said fiercely. They've tried this before with other girls. You have to get rid of them. Her words and tone startled me. What exactly did she mean by, they've tried this before with other girls? All this new information changed around in my mind, crashing into everything I'd believed about the agency. When does your work permit expire? Maria asked me. In 3 weeks. Then forget about them. I'm going to help you make your money and keep it and take it all home with you. Are you crazy? I asked, incredulous. I mean, thank you, but I don't think you understand. They know everything about me and my family. They're going to show up at my house in Budapest. I already went back there once, and they sent someone to follow me, and the recruiter came to my house with a big mean guy and threatened me. My words were rushed and fearful. "What are you, 12 years old?" Petra asked. I couldn't quite tell if she was being sarcastic. "You don't understand," I said. "Fine, we'll leave it at that," Maria said. "But my offer still stands. You let me know when you're ready to leave, and I'll help you. You can stay with me. You'll be putting your life at risk because they will find me at your house. I will make a plan. I've seen enough of these fucking guys take advantage of girls like you." Alec continued to threaten Timea and the other girls with violence if they didn't make more money. Timea was not allowed to rest or see a doctor when she developed an illness. She was warned that if she didn't pay off her debts to the agency by the time the visa expired, they would visit harm upon her and her family. He also said that in order to prevent that from happening, she would be brought back to Canada to work as a dancer, and that the expenses incurred from the trip would be added to her debt, thereby prolonging the time she was indentured to them as a sex worker. It began to seem to her like there was no way out. Timea's illness worsened to the point where she developed a fever and became lightheaded. She was unable to dance and resorted to a measure she had never taken in order to avoid being a victim of Alec's hostility. She prostituted herself in the VIP room. However, the customer bailed when he discovered that her vaginal odor was pungent due to her illness. She went back to the change room where she got some rest. Julius kept checking up on her. He had been very kind to her. At one point, Julius picked up Timea and carried her to his car, where he drove her to a hospital. Though she didn't have a health card, the facility admitted her. A doctor asked her questions about her sex life. She answered like someone who had a boyfriend at home, as opposed to a sex worker. She still felt deeply ashamed of what she was doing for a living. At one point, she mentioned that she had installed a feminine hygiene sponge. The doctor asked Julius to step outside. Once the doctor was alone with her, he conducted a very painful vaginal exam. It turned out that a small piece of the sponge remained, and it had become infected. She was told that the infection could spread to her bloodstream if she didn't undertake a regimen of antibiotics immediately. The sponge portion was removed, she was cleansed on the inside of her vagina, and after being prescribed some antibiotics, she was discharged. She was never asked for ID or for a service charge. It was nearly 4 a.m. when Timea found herself being driven by Julius. She was anxious to return to Fantasia so that Alec could pick her up at 6 a.m., closing time for the club. She fell asleep along the way. 20 minutes later, Timea awoke when the car came to a stop. They were not parked in front of Fantasia. She looked out the window and saw a row of townhouses. He promised he could still get her to the club on time. She was so weak from her illness, he had to help her walk into what he told her was his apartment. He laid her down on a couch and put a blanket around her. He said, "Go to sleep, Allison. You're safe." She said, "It's Timea. My real name is Timea." Back at the club, Timea told Alec she had had a slow day due to her illness, hence the diminutive intake. Surprisingly, he didn't make a big deal about it. It also became clear that he wasn't monitoring her movements as closely as he claimed, for he knew nothing about her hospital visit. The next day, something was off. There were more dancers around, more customers, and there was a vibe in the air she had never encountered before. She asked Petra if she knew what was going on, but she also drew a blank. Suddenly the music was cut off. The house lights came on, and police officers appeared. One of them barked, "Police! Police! This is a raid! Everyone put your hands up!" Over 24 undercover cops posing as customers rose from their tables, handguns and badges in hand. They ordered all the men to stand against one wall. Another dozen cops burst through the back door. They blocked every door and hallway, negating any chance of escape. The strippers Timea didn't recognize turned out to be female cops, and they too flashed their badges. They shouted at the dancers, telling them to put their hands up. The rest of the staff was herded to the other side of the room, and the dancers were placed on the stage. A dancer who was fluent in both Hungarian and English told Timea what the cops were asking the girls. They wanted their basic vital stats, those being their name, age, and citizenship. Timea rehearsed in her mind the details of her artificial identity. Andrea Hernas, September 21st, 1973, almost 25 years old. Another girl who had been translating for Timea said to her, "You are one of Alec's girls, right? Don't worry, I won't get you in trouble, and you're going to be okay. I used to work for him. That's how I came to Canada. My name is Zsofia." Meanwhile, hordes of men were placed in handcuffs and ushered out of the club. Zsofia said, "I don't work for them anymore, and neither should you." Timea was paranoid. She said, "I can't talk to you." She still remembered what Alec told her about police, how they would find out about what she was doing and take her to jail. After the police spoke with each dancer, they would send her to either side of the stage. One officer said that Timea, name and age? In Hungarian, with Zsofia translating, Timea said, "Andrea Hernas, 24. The cops seemed suspicious. Timea looked like she was underage. The officer told her to stand at the other end of the stage and send Zsofia with her so that she could translate. The manager of the club suddenly appeared in handcuffs. The police had seized several documents in the office. They informed the girls that they would be driven to the police stations in cruisers. Timea and the other girls were placed in handcuffs. Timea was terrified that her mother would find out. Her mother was not only an officer of the law, but a woman of integrity in that regard who expected the same standard from her offspring. Timea feared that her mother would disown her. While Timea and the other girls awaited further action while sitting in a waiting room, an officer entered with the documents that were seized at Fantasia. He called out the names of the girls as he sorted through passports and work permits. Timea was asked questions like who she worked for, how long she had been in Canada, if she had had sex for money, and if she bought or trafficked narcotics. She shook her head to all questions. An officer asked her this question that was translated to her in Hungarian by another officer. "Are you doing this work because you want to be doing this work?" He said, "Who's Tony?" Tony Verrudi's name was on her work permit. She said, "He's my agency's manager." "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Is he nice to you?" "Yes." She recalled Alec asking her that after her first visit to Tony's office. She would never actually characterize him as nice, though she was reluctant to label him mean. She just got the impression that he was laboring under the delusion that she was his girlfriend, and he could have sex with her whenever he pleased. She hadn't seen him in a while, so she assumed he had moved on to another girl. She said, "Can you let me go, please? We have a concern. You look very young. How old are you?" 24. What's your name? Andrea Hernandez. When were you born? September 21st, 1973. Are you sure? Yes. One other girl told Timea that they weren't really concerned about the dancers as long as they weren't involved in drug trafficking and working as a minor. Their primary concerns when it came to those clubs were drugs, weapons, and money laundering. Alec picked up the girls and decided not to have them return to Fantasia for a while. He dropped them off at a new club called Lucky's, which was owned and operated by a Russian man named Sergei. The second day at Lucky's, a Hungarian waitress named Beatrix grabbed Timea by the arm to talk to her in confidence. She said, "You know they're scum, right? Sergei hates them, but he needs girls, so they're allowed to drop you off as long as they don't come inside." Though Timea was tempted to delve into this topic in more depth, she was shocked by the visage of Rika entering the room. She was told Rika had been murdered for chafing against the restrictions Alec and his crew imposed upon her. Rika said, apparently unaware that she would ever see her again, "Timea?" Had she been told Timea was murdered? After explaining that Alec told her he had killed her, Rika said, "No, I left. I'd had enough. Alec was yelling at me, threatening me with a baseball bat, and I just ran away and got into a cab. I went to another club I'd heard about, worked there, met someone who worked here, and now I'm here too. You don't need a work permit here. No one checked. I've made $5,000 since I left, and it's all mine." It was as if Rika had chiseled a crack in Timea's world, and a ray of shimmering hope shone through. Everything Timea had been led to believe about Alec and his dirtbag colleagues was now revealed to be based on falsehood and idle threats. Timea said, "Where do you live?" "With a friend of Beatrix. Beatrix is awesome. Be sure to get her number in case you ever need anything. And Timea, you need to get out of the agency too." Natasha paid a visit from Hungary. She told Timea that she and the agency were disappointed by Timea's efforts, and that her family heard from the grapevine that Timea was turning tricks. She was also told she received a promotion. Alec told Timea that she would be placed in charge of collecting the intake from all the girls. During the next commute to a club, Alec told all the girls they would have to start making an additional $200 per day. They complained. He said, "Shut up, all of you, shut up. Don't forget who's in charge here. You do whatever you have to do to make the money." Timea took a different approach, rationally saying to Alec, "Alec, I should be keeping my money for myself now. I should have paid everything off. I need my money to take home with me." Alec was on a rampage now. He said, "What the fuck are you talking about, Timea? And what is this attitude? We give you a promotion, so now you think you're the big boss?" There wasn't enough cabbage in the world to placate that Eastern European national. Timea said, "I didn't mean that. I just mean that I've been working hard and I should be finished soon. I was making at least $1,000 a day at Fantasia, but I still don't have my own money." The geyser of manipulation never dried up as long as Alec had a functional larynx. He said, "You're way off. You've got $1,200 left on your debt. You're forgetting that you still have to pay for your return ticket home before you leave, plus you're on for the next oil change. And everyone has to pay for the apartment. It's not my fault everything's so expensive." Ah, but it was his fault that the agency was not legitimate. Real employment agencies do take a cut of everything their workers make, but they don't charge for basic business expenses like auto body maintenance and motel towels. But this situation was not about employment. It was exploitation. Those girls were being lied to and performing slave labor. They could never make enough money, even those strippers who were not represented by such people did very well if they worked the same hours and conditions. Alec was still laboring under the delusion that Timea would return soon after being deported back to Hungary, subsequent to the expiry of her work permit. He switched gears and tried a more avuncular approach, saying, "Don't worry, Tamika. You'll like the apartment. And when you come back here, maybe you can have your own room. Can I go back to Fantasia then?" "That's not a bad idea. I'll take you, but it will cost an extra $100 for gas." "No problem." Having returned to Fantasia, Timea spoke with Julius and Maria about how she had to push herself harder than ever to increase her intake. Maria said, "When are you going to truly understand that these guys are pimps, Allison? They are the bottom feeders, the scum of everything. You need to get away from them. But they will hurt my family. Is there any way you can tell your family and they can hide somewhere for a while?" "No, absolutely not. My mom is a cop. Her life will be over, and so will my brother's. I can never tell them. This is my problem to fix." "Okay, so why don't you go missing for the next several days? You can stay with me or with Julius. You can earn all the money you need at Fantasia, and then you can give me whatever you still owe your pimps. I'll give it to them after you go back to Hungary, and they'll be off your case." "What about my family?" "Your pimps probably won't let their big boss know right away, if he even exists. They'll try to find you on their own first. Didn't you say they told you that they got fined if they lose a girl? You probably have time. How will I buy a plane ticket?" "I'll help you. You give me the cash and I'll get you the ticket. There's a travel agency near my other job." Timea digested this for a moment. She realized there was one critical snag in this plan. Alec held her passport, and she didn't know where he kept it. Wishing to lift her spirits and imbue her with confidence, she said, "You can do it, Timea. I'll help you. You can stay with me, with Maria, or even Chris." Chris was Fantasia's DJ. Julius said of him, "You're his favorite, and he's a good guy. I'll get you to and from the club, don't worry, and I'll never let those pimps in here look for you." With all their support, Timea now felt that she could execute this plan successfully. Things really came to a head when Timea was informed that Zsofia was found dead. The story was that she was hit by a subway train. There was no word about whether she jumped or had been pushed. Her mother, grandmother, and aunt flew all the way from Hungary to identify the remains. They even visited Fantasia so they could identify her belongings in her locker. Julius said to Timea, "Did she know your guys?" "Actually, she did know them. She said she used to work for them." "You need to get out of here now, unless you want it to be your mom coming here to get your body." Timea said, "Let's go talk to Maria." Maria agreed with Julius, and they began to formulate a strategy for Timea's escape. Chris offered to let her stay at his house. Julius would provide transportation. When Timea broached the subject of Zsofia's death, Alec did not refrain from speaking ill of the dead. He said, "Well, let's just say she was a drug addict, and she wasn't a good listener. She pissed someone off that she shouldn't have. You see what happens to bad girls? During that same car ride, Timea gave Alex some good news, and he was unaware of the development she was describing. She said, "Great news! Tomorrow, a professional hockey team is coming for a special VIP event. Maybe you can pick me up a few hours later so I can earn more money." This was not far-fetched, as Fantasia had entertained many celebrities and businessmen. Alex said, "Great, Tamika. I always knew you were a good girl. How about you just call me when you're ready to be picked up?" Timea gave lip service to this agreement and had no intentions of making that phone call, not with her escape plan in motion. The next day, Alec and Janos dropped Timea off at Fantasia. Alex said, "Be good to those hockey players." When Timea entered the club, Maria, Julius, and Chris were waiting for her. Chris gave her the keys to his house and instructions on how to get settled there. Plus, they made arrangements with a limo company that had a contract with the club to drive Timea to Chris's house. As Timea said of this, "I was stunned. It was all so surreal. To experience such luxury after such deprivation, such kindness after such cruelty, I would have been happy to make my escape in the back of a pickup truck." Before her departure, Julius gave her a slip of paper bearing the phone number of the club. He said, "Just call the club for anything, and we'll make sure those pimps know you're long gone when they come around looking for you. You can just rest for a couple of days." When Timea checked into Chris's house, she slept for nearly 24 hours. It was the longest period of rest she had had since her arrival in Canada. She wanted to make some money before returning to Hungary, so she called Julius at the club. Since she was curious to know what transpired when Alec and Janos showed up to drive her back to the apartment, he said, "Those guys came for you yesterday and today, but I told them I hadn't seen you. They were really mad, but I told them not to come around again. I think it's okay now. If they come again, don't worry. Even if you're here, they won't know." At the end of Timea's first night back at Fantasia, Adina, another one of Alec's dancers, suddenly showed up. She was emotional. She grabbed Timea's arm and nearly shouted at her, saying, "Timea, Alec told me to tell you that every day you spend away from us, he is adding $500 to your debt. Don't make it any worse. Just walk with me out to the car and apologize. Say you made a mistake." "I can't do that." Timea shook herself free of Adina's grip. She continued, "I'm not going back. Don't tell them you saw me. Say nothing." Indicating that she understood, Adina hugged Timea and left. Timea asked Julius to check the parking lot to see if Alec was still waiting. He was gone. Julius took Timea on a detour before driving her home. He took her to the lakeshore so she could have a look at Lake Ontario and the Toronto skyline. At one point, this would have been unthinkable, since Alec had convinced her that Lake Ontario was nothing but a toilet to flush out all the so-called bad girls that worked for him. Under this circumstance, with Julius, she recognized the lake as a specimen of natural beauty. Having been swept away by the emotion of the moment and her affection for Julius, who had become a savior figure in her life, he leaned forward to steal kiss, and she offered up no resistance. Timea was staying at Beatrix's home. She was told that a secretary from her dentist's office, who was fluent in Hungarian, would be calling after she left for the day. Hours later, the phone rang, and Timea answered it in Hungarian. A voice said, Timea. It wasn't the secretary. It was Alec. He said, Is that you? She said nothing. He said, What the fuck are you doing there, you little bitch? I know exactly where you are. We're coming to get you. Now. She began to panic. He said, We're on our way, Timea. You're going to pay us for every day you've been gone, on top of the massive debt you already owe us. And you'll pay in more ways than one. Timea dropped the phone. Her thoughts ran instantly to escape. She ran to the balcony. There was a loud banging on the front door. She heard Alec shouting, saying, Timea, we know you're in there. Open the door. She looked for a place to hide. Alec said, If I have to break this door down, not only will you be sorry, your family will be too. I will chase them down in Hungary. I'll cut your mother's throat, cut your brother's throat, and we're going to fucking kill you too. Timea had been a gymnast in Hungary for many years. She jumped from the railing of Beatrix's balcony to that of the neighbors, landing on some sleeping bags that were stored alongside other camping equipment. She got underneath the sleeping bags. Soon she heard the sound of Beatrix's balcony door being slid open. She heard Alec scream, Timea, where are you, you fucking bitch? He shouted to Janos, She's not here, let's go. Moments later, Alec and Janos were standing at the foot of the building outdoors. Alec shouted upward, You're dead, Timea. You're dead. A couple minutes later, they drove away. 20 minutes later, Beatrix returned, and Timea told her what Alec and Janos had done. They agreed that she couldn't stay there anymore. Beatrix told her that her boyfriend used to sell pot to Alec and Janos, which is most likely how they knew where she lived. She recommended Sergei as a better option for shelter and protection. He allowed her to stay at his home and even drove her to his club. She remained at his place until her flight, which was scheduled for 4 days later. After all that, Timea was still convinced that the only way to get rid of Alec was to give him money. Beatrix was quick to point out that he would only tell her she owed him more than what she'd offered. She told her Sergei would get one of his Russian mafia colleagues to deflect Alec and his douche crew. Timea managed to board a flight back to Hungary. Julius saw her off. Timea was detained at the Budapest airport. She confessed that her passport was a fake, and she disclosed what had happened to her in Canada. She described her experience to police officers, hoping they would bring Alec and his cohorts to justice and help the other girls. Instead, Timea was being charged because they assumed she was lying. To quote one of the officers, I've heard enough. You're being charged with impersonation and fraud. Once we get the people who made that passport, you'll all be in trouble. Another cop walked over to her chair, placed her in handcuffs, and said, Your mother will be thrilled to see you in jail. Well done. Timea was brought to another room where she was interrogated by another officer. When he broached the subject of her dancing, he asked her to demonstrate some moves, but she refused. Another officer spanked her buttocks. He then inserted a gun into her. It was so painful she screamed. The officer said, This should loosen you up, although you're probably already loose, you fucking whore. He continued to rape her with the gun, inserting it in and out, and the pain did not diminish. He put his gun away and raped her with his penis. Timea prayed for death. Timea woke up later on a chair. She was slumped over, unable to sit at first. There was blood on the chair and on her legs. Her jeans were on the floor. She was taken to a washroom. Timea was brought back to the interrogation room. Strangely, the man who facilitated the rape was suddenly understanding and sensitive. He said, "Listen, you seem like a nice girl who got caught up in the wrong crowd. I want to help you." It was surreal to her that he would say such kind things after a sexual assault. He continued, "You're in a pretty bad situation here. You can't leave the country, and you're not going to be able to leave your home if these guys are after you, like you say. In fact, you're probably not even safe in your apartment. But just so you know, this report is probably not going to get into the system for 2 weeks, so you've got some time to apply for a new passport, a real one, and try to leave on that one. Just get out of here." Timea described how she felt as she entered her apartment for the first time in months. "I took off my clothes and turned on the water in the shower and let it get really hot while I was waiting. I took off my clothes and returned on the water in the shower and let it get really hot while I was waiting. I took some painkillers I found in the medicine cabinet. Then I stepped in and let my tears flow over me and be washed away by the water. All of a sudden, I felt enormous grief. My old life was gone. The old me was gone. I wished I had never left Hungary to go to Canada, that I'd done anything but answer that ad in the newspaper. Now I was a broken and used person. I was a whore, just like the police had said. For months I'd dreamed of this moment of coming home, putting on my pajamas, and curling up in bed and being myself again. Now I couldn't do any of that. I was too disgusting. I went into my bedroom and closed the door behind me, leaving my cats out in the living room. I put on a fresh pair of underwear and a menstrual pad since I was still bleeding from the assault. Then I pulled a shirt and leggings from my drawer and lay down on the floor in my room. I lay as still as I could to will away the pain and my fever. Though Zoli was happy to see her, he was also quick to point out that he was worried about her, as he had no idea where she went. He also told her someone sent a fax to the television station where she used to work that said she was a prostitute and a drug user. She denied these claims. He also told her that everybody was angry at her for not calling. He was angry because he was left to contend with the domestic expenses, which included working 3 jobs to keep the apartment. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. 2 days hence, the phone rang and it was a familiar voice. Natasha. She was apoplectic. She said, "You stupid little bitch. What the fuck did you do? You spilled the beans to the police? Are you fucking kidding me? El Cañenos are in jail. If you show up in court and tell them where you got that passport, I swear we will kill you. You are going to pay for this, you little cunt. Just you wait. We will start with your mother and then your brother, and we will leave you until last so you can feel their pain. One day, and trust me, that day will come. Just when you stop looking over your shoulder, we will cut your fucking throat too." With that, she hung up. She got a call from her mother. Her mother said, "Timea, Zoli said you're back. Where the hell were you? I wrote you letters every week, but had no address to send them to. I asked the police in Canada looking for you. Why didn't you call? I told you 100 times to call me when you got there. I will strangle you when I see you. And you didn't ever call me when you got home. What the hell is going on? A man called me a few days ago to say that you owe him $5,000, and then if I don't pay, they will burn my house down. What the hell did you get yourself into over there?" Timea explained that she was feeling too ill to delve into the whole sordid affair. Her mother agreed to ask her another day. Officers from the National Police Service interviewed Timea about her experiences with her traffickers. They knew all about them and made a deal whereby she would testify against them in exchange for having her charges dropped. She agreed. They also vowed to monitor the activity outside her apartment building in an unmarked police car, which they did. Her boyfriend, like everyone else in her life, was outraged that she hadn't kept in touch. He said he was prepared to propose marriage to her before she departed, though his disposition was far from loving at this point. After she explained what happened in broad strokes, careful to omit details about the rapes, he was callous. He said, "Then you're an idiot, and it's all your fault." The same border officer who raped her found out she had applied for a new passport. He told her he had a connection to a man who could approve or reject her passport. He promised to ensure it would be approved if she went to his home and had sex with him. She described how that went down. "He ripped my clothes off of me, threw me on his bed, turned me over, and entered me hard from behind. I refused to show him my pain. I just wanted it to be over so I could get my passport. But he wanted more than just that. I endured 3 more rounds, each punctuated by him smoking a cigarette in between. All I could do was try my best to pretend I was Allison and to picture my safe place, the beautiful field of flowers. But it was almost impossible. He kept talking to me, insulting me, and using the dirtiest words I'd ever heard in Hungarian. Finally, after more than 5 hours, he'd had enough. He pushed me off the bed and onto the ground. "Get your shit together, get dressed, and get out of my house. Don't ever tell anybody about this or I'll kill you. Do you understand?" I nodded. I pulled on my clothes and ran out of the apartment and into the street. When she departed by air toward Canada, she had these thoughts. "I said goodbye to my homeland, the place I'd once belonged, but which had betrayed me in so many ways, and which I had betrayed too." When Timea returned to Canada, she got settled into her own apartment and got a job working under the table at Lucky's. She supplemented her income at a hair salon owned by Hungarians. At the hair salon, Timea styled for a customer who turned out to be involved with a legal initiative called Project Alonzo. The objective was to arrest those who exploited foreign workers who toiled in the sex industry as strippers and prostitutes. The man was one of their key translators. His name was Laszlo. He proposed to Timea that they meet in a cafe. There he said to her, "If you want to come forward, I will support you. You won't be deported." Timea was interviewed first by a police officer and then by federal investigators, including the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and immigration officials. She was issued a work permit so she could be employed legally. She was also informed that Tony Veruti would soon be arrested, much to her relief. Veruti was arrested on February 24th, 2000. A police officer who interviewed Timea and also befriended her called her to say, "We've carried out a search of his home, his office, and the whole club, and while I can't tell you what we found, copies of both your original and your fake passport, as well as your first work permit and the second one. We also found dozens more passports of other girls. He is in custody, and his bail hearing is in a couple of days. Timea still couldn't relax. She said, "What do I do now?" He said, "Nothing. We just wait for the bail hearing. Your safety is not in danger. There is nothing you need to do. I just wanted you to know." That was a load off her mind. The next day, there was a picture in a local newspaper of that same officer leading Tony out of his club in handcuffs. Tony was charged with attempting to live off the avails of prostitution, 1 count of keeping a common bawdy house, 2 counts of exercising control, and 3 counts of sexual assault against Timea. It was a massive relief for her to see him as the powerless one for a change. He was granted bail a few days later. Though that was concerning to Timea, she knew she could call her police officer friend if Tony moved against her. Though Timea was convinced that it was necessary for her to cooperate in an investigation into Sergei and Lucky's, she felt guilty since they had been so kind and helpful to her. During a police raid, guns and narcotics were found on the premises. It turned out Sergei was an arms dealer. Lucky's was closed permanently. Timea had to find a job elsewhere. Timea got hired to wait tables at a pub. One night a man approached her while she was walking home. He seemed to recognize her. She presumed he was a customer of the pub. He said to her, "You think you're through, huh? You thought we wouldn't find you? Consider this a friendly reminder to keep your mouth shut when you go to court. Tony is a good friend. You are fucking up his life." The man walked away. She reported the incident to her cop friend, Mike. He documented her report, but said there was nothing else he could do. Timea began having nightmares about Alec, Janos, Tony, and the rest of them all over again. Tony's trial was set for February 23, 2004. Timea worried that she would not perform well at the trial. She worried that Tony's lawyer would succeed at discrediting her. March 8, 2004. Tony was acquitted of all charges. The prosecutor had no enthusiasm for the case, and his efforts were lackadaisical at best. Tony's lawyer, on the other hand, succeeded at portraying Timea as a liar who was just trying to get Canadian citizenship. Timea was in legal limbo as she waited through the process to get approval for legal residency. She struggled to hold down jobs due to her emotional state. She was frustrated by all the hardships that came her way, and she channeled that anger into escort work. She was determined that that time around she would not be an exploited victim, and she wasn't. She gave prostitution up when a client pulled a gun on her. Timea was granted permanent residency. To quote Timea, "I was filled with new energy and excitement for life, and I felt unstoppable. Being granted legal status didn't just give me permission to stay in Canada. It gave me permission to dream dreams and have a real chance at seeing them come true. I started right away." Timea became involved in a program put together by law enforcement to help girls who had been victimized as she had. She soon read an article in a newspaper that mentioned a new law criminalizing human trafficking in Canada. This article clarified for her, with that term, what she had been through, and she became even more determined to help the survivors. Thank you for listening to Human Monsters. Bye for now.